afternoon. Welcome. Good news on the India Hangout. Formula One ex-champion Michael Schumacher is out of coma. He has left the French hospital where he was being treated since the accident, and he is now entering a long phase, what appears to be a long phase of rehabilitation. And Ayaz, Memon at Cricketwala is here. Hormazd, Sorabjee, editor Autocar India, also joins us. Hormazd, let me start off with you. Tell us how you've been following this whole event. I mean, ever since the time that Michael Schumacher met with that injury, skiing injury.
One needle was feeling, but one didn't know how serious it was. And I think one just kept, living in hope that he'd improve. But clearly, there were no signs of him getting better. There were reports that he had shown signs of progress, and then there were long lapses of silence. And I think just when we were fearing the worst, that he'll never come out of the coma, we've got this news, which is absolutely fantastic.
Ayaz, do you want to?
Yeah, well, I think this is the best news we've heard, at least in the world of sports. The best story, the best information that we could have got. He's been in coma for what, more than 6 months. So this kind of a recovery is it's miraculous. We must of course give credit to modern medicine and the kind of systems that they put in place to, even to look after him after that serious injury. So you must acknowledge the role that the doctors and medicine has played, and also a very strong willpower that he seems to be having.
Okay. Hormazd, can you take us back a little bit and tell us about what Schumacher was before that accident, and then we'll come back to the present.
Well, I think his record really speaks for himself. Maximum number of Grand Prix wins in Formula One, the maximum number of World Championships, pole positions, number of points scored, absolutely just every possible record he's beaten. So it kind of shows, talent is one thing, but it shows underneath a steely determination, and I'm sure somewhere in that brain that clearly has manifested itself in, as Ayaz said, what seems to be a miraculous recovery. Of course, there's still a long way to go. The rehab is a long process, but from despair of him never kind of getting out of the coma and to kind of moving out of hospital, I think really it is a factor of a lot of things. It's a factor of luck, of course, and I think Schumacher as a person, I'm sure he has been a fighter all along. He's the kind of guy who hates losing. In fact, he's even been controversial because of that, unsportsmanlike, a lot of people have said, in his quest to win. But it's something he doesn't like to be beaten, and I think even in his current condition, I'm sure he is fighting even harder than he did for any Grand Prix.
I'm sure you've interacted with him or encountered him at some point, if not many points. Any sort of anecdotes you would take away which would illustrate, you've taken away which illustrate what you were just saying?
Yeah, well, I have met him several times. I think the first long interaction we had was when he met Sachin Tendulkar at the British Grand Prix in 2002. I mean, we were all there. And I think he was very relaxed. He was completely on top of his game, just winning all Grand Prix. He won the championship that year. And I think, he comes across as a very mature guy. I think there's a very human side to him as well. He's, when he gives time, he's completely focused. He's 100% professional. People, said he's arrogant, but, when you interact with him, he doesn't come across that at all. And I think above all, he kind of grew to become the sort of senior statesman in the sport, because he was pretty old by the time he retired. And I just think the level of maturity which he finally exited the sport with was just fantastic.
So two guys will be delighted at what we heard today is, of course, Hormazd, Sorabjee and Sachin Tendulkar, because Sachin is a great fan of Schumacher, as we know, and Hormazd and Sachin have met him together. But Hormazd, have you and Sachin talked about this as yet, or is it it's just too early for the news? It's not kind of spread around.
No, not spoken to him about it yet. But I think everyone would be delighted. Obviously, anyone who's followed Formula One I think all of us, it's affected us, and frankly, even beyond just Formula One fans. I mean, I know for one, my wife has been deeply affected by this because all said and done, Schumacher really, I think, especially for us in India, he was really the name when Formula One started getting popular. And don't forget, I think when it was first started getting televised in the early 90s, I think 93, 94, that's really when the Schumacher phenomenon really came about. So I think for Indians, I think Schumacher really holds a special place in our hearts. And, you know, even when he went to the Indian Grand Prix, the first Indian Grand Prix, I remember the maximum cheers were for Schumacher, you know, then for Naren Karthikeyan. So really, I think Schumacher was really is something special for all of us Indians. And, you know, even someone like Sachin Tendulkar, I know he's a massive, massive fan of Schumacher. And but that's just one of the many millions of motor racing fans, you know, who also just think Schumacher is really the ultimate driver there ever was.
So, Hormazd, you met him a few times, but did he ever show any kind of passion for skiing? This is something that at least I didn't know, that he was so fond of skiing, and which led to his accident. Of course, it was an accident; it can happen to anybody. But you know, involvement in other sports.
No, I mean, to be honest, I've never really had that opportunity to talk to him about skiing or any other sports. It's been purely interviews, it's been purely business, it's been purely a journalist speaking to a sportsman. That's been the sort of context I've spoken to him. I think what one knows is that Schumacher is a speed junkie. I mean, he loves just anything fast. He still used to go-kart quite regularly. In fact, he hurt himself in a biking accident as well, so he used to race motorbikes. So I think the speed was something within him. But I don't think he was the kind of guy to take risks, you know, especially not at this stage in his life. And I think this ski accident also was just absolutely unlucky. And, you know, I think that's really what it was. And in fact, Schumacher has had injuries also in Formula One. He broke his leg in 99 it was. And, you know, came back. He didn't win the championship that year, but then won it the next year. So clearly, Schumacher is one who has had injuries in the past, both in racing and otherwise. But sadly, this skiing one was one that, you know, one really, no, I don't think anyone could have imagined would put him in this condition.
Hormazd, a more general question. I mean, obviously you're focused more on motor racing, and there's Ayaz who's follows cricket very closely. And something to both of you. I mean, you think sportsmen in general, and maybe people who are in some sports, have greater resilience and maybe a fighting spirit, or is it something that's uniform?
Well, speaking from my side, I mean, seeing what's happened in motor racing, I think there is just absolutely no question that the recoveries a top-level Formula One driver has made from injuries is just something remarkable. I think case in point is Niki Lauda, who in his 1976 accident, which really killed him, he had some, you know, huge amount of third-degree burns. His lungs were burnt, everything. And he was back on the track in 6 weeks and took 4th place at Monza. I mean, you have to be of a certain, you know, different level of person. You can't be an ordinary guy to do that. And I think it's the training, it's the focus, it's the physical fitness, and above all, you know, it's the kind of really the mental capacity to want to overcome these kind of difficulties that really makes people succeed. And in the end, I think Ayaz, you'd agree that after a certain point, you know, your physical capabilities apart, to be an ultimate sportsman, it's a mind game. It's really what's happening in your mind that really makes you finally succeed.
The key question in a way we're asking today, right?
It is. You
saying,
know, Govind, it's a very interesting
question.
question.
Can we motivate ourselves to greater?
I think what happens is when you're at that level, and especially if you're a sportsman who's been around for like a decade and a half, maybe 2 decades, your survival instinct is very strong. Whatever the sport, even if you're playing cricket and you're a batsman, you can get out on 1 delivery. So you have to kind of preserve your wicket. You have to be mentally very tough, apart from being physically fit. And more so in the case of, say, I would say in motor racing, where the physical danger is like omnipresent.
Yeah.
When you're racing, it's almost every minute.
You're flirting with death all the time.
Flirting with grave danger all the while. So you become even more kind of, you know, instinctive in how to survive. But you have to be very mentally tough. apart from being physically fit. So, and I think this is the great thing about sports, just to be a little philosophical, that sports teaches you that even if you fall down, you can stand up and run again. That's why we say
Any anecdotes that come to mind from the world of cricket? Of this nature, I don't know if anyone's met this kind of an accident and bounced back or in any way, but people who've shown exemplary return.
I mean, you know, you can talk of Anil Kumble having his jaw broken by a West Indies fast bowler coming back and batting, getting it strapped. It's not yet healed, but he comes and plays. It's not, you know, as melodramatic as obviously this, but yeah, there are instances in every sport. So you know, some people play for 5 hours and continue playing despite pain, injury, whatever else. It could be in a tennis match, it could be in a cricket match with some serious injury.
Right. Hormazd, so the point that Ayaz was also making, you know, that a race car driver or a Formula 1 driver is also in some ways endangering his or her life, as it may be, and therefore is playing for much larger stakes, and perhaps that increases the level of determination and the ability to fight back when the situation when there is a situation like that.
I think so, absolutely. And I think, you know, you speak to any Formula 1 driver and you ask them, you know, are you scared of death and things like that? And frankly, you know, they do think about it, but if they thought about it all the time, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing and they wouldn't be quick at all. Because when you're fighting for that 1/100th of a second or that 1,000th of a second, the last thing on your mind really is worrying about whether you're going to get hurt or not. So I think, you know, they have a certain philosophical view to death and danger. But I think they have sort of, as Ayaz said, you know, built a kind of a survival instinct, you know, which they really honed over the years. All of them have got into some kind of an accident at some point or the other. Obviously, that's an experience which they move on with. But clearly, I think they've all been living on a knife edge, and I think they've been quite comfortable with that.
A key question for me now, what does this mean for motorsport and F1? Michael Schumacher, I mean, you know, it had become so grim after his accident, all kinds of stories that emerged, not only because he got injured while skiing, not while motor racing, but even so, the inherent dangers of speed junkies became, you know, kind of much talked about. What does it mean now, his revival? Does it kind of, will it spread some good cheer, some more optimism?
Well, you know, I think it's too early to say, but I think the fact that he's come out of a coma, that is just absolutely fantastic news. Obviously, you know, one would love to see him healthy back again, and obviously on the pit wall of a Grand Prix in the future. That may be wishful thinking, but I think you know, Schumacher is such a legend. I think the motor racing world, you know, is just not reconciled or ready to lose him so early on right now, and you know, for a reason which is just so unfortunate. So I think obviously this is great news for Formula 1, for all motor racing fans, and I think for sport in general, that you know, one of the greatest sporting champions we've ever seen is on the right road to recovery.
Right, and Hormazd, how do you see things playing out? I mean, do you see, I don't know, do you see celebrations? Do you see things happening now?
I don't. I think, you know, everyone's going to be viewing this a little cautiously. Obviously, there's cautious optimism. I don't think there's really, well, it is cause for celebration. But, you know, at the end of the day, everyone wants to see Michael the way people remember him. And hopefully, you know, one really doesn't know the extent of how serious his injury still is. It's all kept very hush-hush, so one can only speculate. But from what I understand, you know, I mean, 6 months in a coma, obviously he's not going to be running, you know, in another month or so. So I think clearly one just, you know, fingers crossed, just hopes for the best.
News report does talk about a period of rehabilitation, assuming, I mean, any injury, a spinal injury will obviously call for a lot of rehabilitation, and that length of that rehabilitation can really vary. And I don't know if you've seen any other cases, Ayaz.
Well, you know, I mean, the closest I can think of is Christopher Reeve, you know, who acted as Superman, and he fell off a horse, and you know, but obviously then he was paralyzed from neck downwards. Hopefully that's not the case here. But as Hormazd mentioned, that this has been a really serious accident. So the rehab process will take its time. The great news, of course, is that he's not in hospital, he's left hospital. He's not
And
in
that
coma,
itself
he's
is the
come
great
out of
inspiration
coma.
for a lot of
It's a great
people.
inspiration. I
Yeah.
think that's really, for me, it's been the story of the year, as I mentioned.
Okay, and you already got responses saying that's not the story of the year. Something else is.
Well, we've got some political diehards who see otherwise, but that's a different matter.
Hormazd, story of the year for sports.
Well, I think, let's put it this way, I think this to me definitely is, because frankly for me Formula One isn't really going in the right direction. The races, fans are losing interest, there's no excitement, the cars sound terrible, they look terrible, the rules are much more complicated. We've just got it now locked up between Mercedes fighting it out. So the good news is that, Ricciardo won the last race, but clearly, I mean, this is not the Formula One as we remember it. And the Formula One as we remember it, at least for diehard fans, is really Schumacher fighting and, just thrilling us with some brilliant talent. So I think for me, definitely this is, the best bit of sports news I've had.
Yeah,
It's the best good news story, certainly.
Right, and it's a great story of, I think, personal inspiration, which I think as we've started out by discussing, goes way beyond F1 motor racing.
I think there are two dimensions to it, Govind.
Yeah.
We must be honest about the medical care that has gone in, and there's a lot of expertise that is needed for such cases. And obviously, there's the personal kind of inspiring story of is a heroic recovery from his own perspective, if you see it, or a sportsman's perspective, that this instinct to survive is so strong.
Right. So we've got one of our colleagues, Shilpa, standing by and speaking to some F1 fans. If I got that right, Shilpa, over to you.
Schumacher suffered from coma last December in 2013 due to a ski injury. It wasn't just a blow to his near and dear ones, but also to fans worldwide. Standing with me are two very relieved fans that in the race. Our first reaction guys was finding out that Michael Schumacher is out of his coma.
I'm actually pretty happy. I was surprised before. I thought he wouldn't survive this thing because most of the doctors were like he's brain dead, and all of a sudden he's come back. It's like so much. He's good now.
And what about you? Relieved?
Very relieved. Just one thing, I was not good. But with that being said, I'm really relieved. I mean, he's retired, but doesn't mean that he should leave. It's nice to have legends around when the next generation of racers and drivers come up. So, yeah,
Yes, so phones ringing all around, everyone's exchanging messages, congratulatory messages. So that's the mood around here. Back to you, Govind.
There you are, so some fans from here in Mumbai, but obviously as the news spreads, there are going to be more and more people who will be welcoming this news and celebrating, like we said, not just the story of someone who's come out of coma, but of sheer inspiration and powerful.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Govind, I didn't think anything would upstage in terms of news value Messi's goal against Bosnia, that magical goal, but this news, quite deservingly so, has upstaged it. This is really the headline stuff.
Hormazd, last word?
I think, I mean, not much more to add, Govind, but again, I think I just want to get too ahead of myself in this. Let's, as I said, fingers crossed, it's still a long road for rehab. We really don't have too much information. Getting out of a coma, that's one thing, but we don't know what state Michael is in. One just hopes he's not going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, and just that he's back on the pit wall at some point at a Grand Prix.
All our wishes are with him for that. Hormazd, thank you very much for speaking with us, and Ayaz, thank you again for being here and joining us on this, what, as Ayaz says, the most biggest news story, at least in the sporting world.
The good news story,
Good news in the sporting world. Thank you so much for joining us on the India Hangout.